So another recording, part two today because I didn't do any yesterday because my internet was down. So part two. So I want to talk about research when it comes to physical fitness, health, disease, all these things, and why I believe much of this is still very much in its infancy, and there's a certain arrogance that we've come to as a society and some of the researchers and professionals. I heard one doctor, and I thought it was an astute observation. He said, you know, we all have cell phones, and we don't know how they work, but we know how to work them, and we know what they do. So he said, picture a caveman with a cell phone in his hand. And he said, that's about how far we understand the human body at this point in time. There's so much going on in there. There's so many variables. It's so complicated that we're really still just at the beginning of these things. And yet we've gotten to a point where, as I said, there's a certain degree of arrogance. And it would be one thing if doctors were allowed to make judgment calls on their own. And that was the case the way it once was. But another podcast that I've had is that now it's medicine by numbers. And medicine by numbers is kind of like when I was in the financial services business, you weren't allowed at the end with all the regulators to think too much. You got a client to fill out a risk profile questionnaire, and whatever way he answered the questions, you had to sell him a certain investment, and you weren't allowed to stray from that. So, and the guidelines were all done for you. You couldn't make a decision as to whether or not a client, or they couldn't make a decision, if they wanted to, that they should be in a different investment than the guidelines occurred. Same thing if you go for a loan at a bank, a mortgage, things like that. There's a certain grid. If you don't meet the grid, nobody gets to make a judgment call. Well, your doctor these days, if you go in and your cholesterol level is at a certain level, he prescribes you cholesterol pills. If your blood pressure is above a certain, you get blood pressure medication. Everything is by the numbers, and it's based on guidelines. And I'm not making this up. I got this watching a podcast from a guy that used to teach medical school and was involved in creating the curriculum for medical school. And he was talking about how things have gotten really bad. And a really good point that he made was back in the day, he said, if I make a bad call for that patient, then I could hurt that patient. But he says when the guidelines are sweeping generalizations that apply to entire populations, then if those guidelines are wrong, then you're hurting entire populations. And he also pointed out that once guidelines are put in place, whether it's by the FDA, the CDC, the World Health Organizations, the College of Surgeons, whatever all these governing bodies are, it takes forever for them to change, even though there's more evidence. There's a confirmation bias. When more evidence is presented that goes against the guidelines, it is resisted. And it's an interesting thing. There's a saying about Stephen Covey used to say, all breakthroughs are break-withs, meaning that something becomes ingrained. It's the way we do it. It's the way we've always done it. And breakthroughs are always break with those things. And the other thing is, there's a saying that all truth goes through three stages. And the stage is at first it's ridiculed, then it's violently attacked, and finally it's adapted as self-evident. Somebody else added, the fourth one is people claim it was their idea all along. So anyways, I just think there's, keeping an open mind about, new things that come out and how little we know and what we don't know, we don't know. Bye for now.